Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Inside the Coach's Office. My name is Tom Murphy Jr. I'm here as always with Coach Brian Barnes, head coach of Bishop Foley Catholic High School. And today is episode 3. And we are very excited to welcome Jared Purcell, local sports reporter from MLive. Jared has been on the scene for long time, about
make me
10
sound that
years
old.
or so. I know. Yeah, he remembers back in 1952 and no, but Coach Barnes, it's great to see you. Jared, welcome to the show. Welcome to Inside the Coach's Office.
Thanks. I'm glad to be here. I think it's cool what you guys are doing, and hopefully I get my name on like a wall of fame once you guys make it big here. So
yeah. Episode 3, I was telling Jared before the show, episode 2 was Coach Corey Parker from River Rouge, and we had a really fun time. So you got some big shoes to fill, man. So hopefully you got your game face on.
well, you know what? I've had plenty of conversations with Coach Parker too, and he's a great guy to have. So you guys really hit a home run with that one. So
nice. Yeah. I think Coach Barnes and I agree on that one with you. Coach Barnes, the hot topic that we're going to talk about today is the coach media dynamic on the high school level. And so my first question, I'm going to start with you, Coach Barnes. When after a game, and a reporter comes up to you, whether it's a high impact win or a really, really tough loss, do you find yourself being the same even keel, or does your dynamic change a bit depending on like if you're happy or mad?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, let me also reiterate, I'm excited to have Jared here. I mean, we're week 3 already. Like this is like, we're killing it. I mean, it's the middle of winter time. It's snowing a lot today, and it's the middle of basketball season, which I like basketball, but like, it's really cool to be talking football again. So we're doing some good things. So keep it up. Yeah. When I was younger, I took a different approach because I see sometimes how the media is portrayed, or I see how some of the more abrasive guys that are loud and have their shtick, especially on the radio, and guys and the way they treat coaches. And when I was younger, not that I didn't have a respect for, the guys covering our games and stuff, but I definitely looked at them a little differently than they do now. And I'm actually as I get older, very appreciative what some of the men and women in the field do for our, the great game of football in Michigan. Very appreciative of that. And so, I've obviously coached in big games and won, and I've coached in big games and lost, and we've been blown out before, and we've won close games. So I've experienced it all. And so, I try to treat them with respect, with what they're doing and in their profession, and definitely try to keep an even keel. And, like I said, I've never had a moment where I've been abrasive or I felt anybody's asked me something inappropriate or disrespectful to me or my program and the kids. And so, I try to answer it as honestly as I can, because I know those guys and gals, they don't want just coach speak, more or less. I try to be as honest and transparent as I can with what happened. And, I'll tell them the great things we did, and I tell them the things we didn't do so well and that we had to work on it. So, for the most part of my experience, like I said, guys like Jared and others has been really cool to me in what we've done.
Yeah. And Jared, so how do you approach that situation? Because you're there to do a job, and however the game goes, you got to get those quotes, you got to get the story, and you got to do it in a timely fashion. So how do you approach the coaches you got to talk to differently if it's a win or a loss, or like do you always go into it no matter what happened, or do you got to change your style depending on the situation?
yeah, I mean, I think as the game goes along, we're formulating in our head what we think our lead or our angle is going to be, but that has also changed throughout the game. I mean, there's been like ridiculous comebacks where we're just like totally like erasing everything we had in mind. But when it comes to approaching coaches, I mean, it's just at first, when I first started in this business, I did not know like how any of the coaches were going to react. So you just had to go in pretty straightforward, not beat around the bush, and then just let them answer in the way that they wanted to. As you get to know the coaches more, like I have had, over the course of 12 years now, you start to understand who can handle the losses better, who's better to talk to after a win and stuff like that. Who you can joke around with. It's just when people lose, though, that's the thing where you have to be careful at, because at other levels like pro and college, I mean, that comes with the job as a coach. You're going to get criticism like crazy, but at the end of the day, these coaches, a lot of them, are teachers. They work with these kids. They put in just as much work as they can as the kids do. So I understand if like coaches aren't even keeled and are disappointed. They're not necessarily rude, but I mean, you just have to be a little more sensitive, I think, about going into it in terms of how you're going to ask the questions. You can't just be going in like, hey, coach, hey, let's joke around or anything like that. But you just want to be as straightforward as possible and kind of formulate ahead of time how you're going to approach it. Because especially with football games and as further you go into the playoffs, you want to get the perspective of both coaches. I mean, there's sometimes earlier in the season where a coach just like bolts because they got to get on the bus or something. And it's like, okay, I can deal with that. But when you have to talk to someone after a double overtime loss in like the, state semifinals, that's going to be tough. And when you're talking to people, there's people coming up onto the podium at the state championships and they're crying, you just got to be straightforward with them. And if you're straightforward and they can see that, you're not trying to take a dig at them, they'll be honest with you. I mean, whatever they're feeling and however they answer it is up to them. But, you just got to be as direct as possible.
Yeah. So Jared, that's a great point when you're dealing with like somebody that's going through a loss, and then it's an immediate response. So whether it be a coach or a player, that's got to be very difficult because they're on such an emotional high at that point, especially like you said, you lose a double overtime loss in the semifinals. You got to talk to them within 10, 15 minutes. They're still processing those emotions. Mm-hmm. With the head coach is one thing. Have you had experiences where you've talking to players that have dealt with like tough losses like that, and then and how do you approach talking to a high school player who's still trying to process his emotions?
Yeah, that's probably the toughest part. Yeah, that's probably the toughest part about an interview process when you're talking to someone after a loss who's an athlete, because at the end of the day, these are still teenagers, and this is not something they get paid for. This is their outlet. They put their heart into it. They care about it very deeply without, much fanfare. And when they get to such a far point into the season and they lose or something like that, you just got to know when to put on the brakes. I mean, you ask a question, and if the kid is obviously like, either choked up, gives a one-word answer, maybe you can ask them to, reiterate it. And if it's still not up to par, you just move on. Because I mean, you got to try and find someone else, because you don't want to keep digging into someone who is obviously not in an interview mode, because that's not going to help you out either. So,
yeah. And then coach, what do you do, like, as far as letting your kids, especially probably your seniors, they're, how do you say, like, they're still kids, but they're adult. They might be 18, so they're considered, socially adults. Do you let those kids talk to reporters and then have that moment, or do you just shield them?
No, definitely not. I mean, that's part of growing up, right? Is, getting interviewed and doing things that are uncomfortable. If it is after a loss, for example, but even after a win. And I let our guys know, we have conversations about like what's appropriate and how we handle ourselves whether it be, a story during the week or after a football game. So we make sure we're as respectful as we can be to the reporters. So again, we're appreciative for what they do, and also give credit and respect to our opponent and the officials. We really make sure that our guys are respectful and handle themselves the right way.
Yeah. Jared, how do you go? Because there are some good instances of high school kids who have great stories. And I know MLive and, any media outlet is always looking for a great human interest story, tied to sports. How do you go about seeking out high school players who have unique stories that you want to feature?
Yeah, and sometimes you just get tipped off by people. Like they'll email you out of the blue and say, hey, I know about this kid, his like father is battling this illness, or he overcame this disease when he was younger, or all these different things that people come after you with, because and sometimes they just fall into your lap. You'll talk to a kid after a game and you suddenly find out something about him that no one else knows. It's always kind of like how you want to frame a story. You want like a really good human interest side if you can do it, because it's always fun to tell a story about a kid who might not have the spotlight on him all the time. This was years back when I think at Woodhaven High School, and they just had a big win, and I did a story. I don't even remember his name now, but I did a story on this kid who had a really big play in the game and ended up being a difference. And I interviewed the kid, talked to him about it. He talked about all the work he put in to get to that point. And then, I got an email the next day from like his aunt saying she was like in tears reading the story, because, this kid has had such a great, put so much effort into it and things like that. The approach for, finding stories is just, you got to go out and find them yourself if people aren't giving them to you. But luckily we get tips sometimes, or coaches will say, hey, if you can't do it today, think about down the line doing a story about this kid. But I've been able to tell some, pretty great and memorable stories over the years, for all sports.
Jared, is there a favorite of you? Like, do you have a favorite story that stands out to you that you've done over the years?
For sure. I'm pretty biased because I'm also a cross country coach and a track coach. So I kind of get really emotionally invested when I do stories on those kids. And it's almost 5 years ago. There was a runner at Detroit UD Jesuit named Sean English, and this was news all over the place. He was part of a car accident, I should say. His family was on the side of the road trying to be like the Good Samaritans. They saw an accident, they got out to help, and then another car came into the scene, and he lost one of his legs in that accident. And he was the best runner at their school at the time. His dad was a collegiate runner. He was well on his way to doing so. He was Catholic League champion as a sophomore in the 2 mile or mile, I think it was the mile. And he basically had it all taken away from him. And so I was able to get in touch with him through my connections, through, being a coach in cross country. And, he eventually made his recovery, got a prosthetic, got a racing prosthetic too, like one of those blades that the kids use. And I got to be there for his first race, which was also his last race of his high school career. He just wanted to do one more race before he graduated as a senior. He ran the 400, which was one lap around the track. And it was one of the coolest things I've ever seen, because no one cared about who won that race. They're all cheering for the kid in last place. Like people were running across the field to cheer him on in the backstretch. People ran across, and like everyone was giving him standing ovation. It was super emotional, and I got to know him and his family really well through that. I'm actually wearing his bracelet right now, the Sean Strong bracelets. And yeah, his mom gave me like a whole bag of those after I did the story. So I've just been wearing them on and off since. And I mean, people say, as journalists, you don't want to get like too attached to things, but when you're talking about kids and them overcoming things that you as an adult would probably struggle with, it's hard not to get emotional about it. Even when interviewing his parents and his family, we had to take breaks just because things got emotional and things like that. So It's actually good to really feel human when you're writing a story and talk about human things instead of just, typing like, here's the final score of tonight's game, and this guy scored this many points, and this person had this many assists. When you can really get into the nitty gritty of things and tell someone's backstory, it becomes way more than the sport, even though the sport is where it blossomed from.
I'm glad you said that about getting to know the background of an athlete, because I think a lot of times, unfortunately, it happens all the time in the NFL and college, and it's unfortunately now trickled down to high school a little bit. I think at times fans, especially when they're looking out at a player in whatever sport, they just look at the number, right? And they look at the number of the kid, and if the kid screwed up, how it's impacting like them and their feeling, right? So I always, I kind of joke, but there's people on every Saturday watching a college football game in the state of Michigan, whether it be Michigan, Michigan State, whoever. And if a 19-year-old kicker that happens to wear number one, misses a field goal and they lose the game, their weekend is ruined. That number one, right? And they don't, I think at times as fans don't always put the human being, into the story like that, right? And unfortunately, I think you get a jaded perspective of things. So that's a great point. When you get that human interest, part of it, it just adds more meaning to everything.
Yeah, I know, because I feel like sometimes, especially with social media these days, things can be very surface level for a lot of people, and that's what a lot of the teenagers and kids see. It's very surface level, very passive. You can see a tweet, you can see a highlight. That's all you need to know, and that's not really, the whole story there. I mean, it's kind of hardwired into some people that way. So, and you kind of see a little more, I guess, haters now online for high school kids, which is ridiculous. But there's always more to the story in the background too. So obviously people try and also take advantage of that system as well, but that's a whole nother thing. So
Absolutely.
Coach Barnes, so speaking on that human interest level, obviously as a high school coach, you're and a teacher at the school, you really get involved with these kids. How do you separate your job as a high school coach and trying to be a mentor to the kid? Like, because you got to win games, because if you lose a lot, you might not have a job, so you got to win games, but you also got to mentor the kids. How do you separate that balance?
So I think one of my greatest strengths is also one of my greatest faults. Is like you said, I'm accessible, and I do care to the point where I feel like I'm treating my players like my own sons. I have 3 daughters under the age of 15, and so I don't get that father-son relationship, and so I look at all my players in a way as like my sons. And so sometimes it's almost to my detriment that I might let something slide because I care about a kid so much, or maybe I don't see something that's going on and I get burned by it later. But I can't imagine coaching any other way. I am heavily invested in my kids. I'm heavily invested in my school, with a lot of the stuff that we do. And I don't just care about the football kids. I care about, all the kids that I come across every day. And you're right, there is a balance there. But ultimately, I look at it like this for high school football. So when I was younger as a coach, I focused strictly on the end, meaning I focused on the scoreboard. And I always told our guys, like, it's a big game. This is a game we have to win. This season was the best year in our school's history, with the first prep bowl championship in school's history. And if you ask any of my kids, we never talk about winning championships. We never talk about stuff like that. We talk about being a champion and what that means. How you carry yourself in school, how you carry yourself when you're treating others, how you carry yourself at home with your family, how you carry yourself on the practice field, and things of that nature. And so me, if I'm strictly only being judged on wins and losses, then I'm not at the right place, because it's more than that to me. It's about our growth mentality, and what we're doing. I want our kids to get better from the first day of practice till their very last day of practice of high school football, and not just that football. I want them to get better academically. I want them to get better as a human being, and finally as a football player. And so ultimately, I think I'm judged on, and I think all high school coaches should be judged on, the state of their program, right? So Are kids excited to come to practice every day? Are you getting new kids to come out every year because of all the cool things that you're doing, things of that nature? If you focus on that stuff, and that's, in my opinion, what, is proper, good things ultimately happen at the end. And you might not see it right away. When I first got there, we talked about, the analogy of watering the bamboo, right? If you constantly water a bamboo, you might not see growth for quite a long time, but as long as you keep doing it, it's going to shoot up. Right. And so we focus on that, and the results worked out for us.
Yeah. Jared, have you ever been in a situation where you got a tip on a negative situation about a high school kid, and you had to decide, do you put this negative story out because you're a reporter and that's what you do? You report the news, but having this information get out might hurt this kid. And what does MLive say about, what does your boss say about something like that? How to treat a situation like that?
Yeah, well, in most cases, I mean, you're dealing with minors, so it's even, more sensitive. You can't really put their name out there because, unless they're actually being charged with something. But I mean, there's so many different situations that on the spectrum of what a negative thing means, because, I've had to cover everything from eligibility issues where, kids tried to, beat the system in terms of like the transfer rules and stuff like that, and they got caught on it. And then there's things like hazing, which is a very, very tough and sensitive subject to cover. And, it's just, you have to really, really have to know how far along things are, how public is this knowledge, because you can also report that, individuals within a program have been, not charged, but are being investigated for like hazing or something like that. But you can't start naming people right off the bat, because you have to wait for something to be legitimized by the proper investigators or authorities or something like that. And even with, those transfer things, because that stuff gets looked into by the MHSAA when it's brought to them. They don't actually actively go and look for that stuff. So you also have to make sure that, things are on par with all the proper authorities before you want to start naming kids, because, it's just not the right thing to do. I mean, it's even hard. Like, you guys remember like the J. Rue Campbell stuff. It was probably almost 10 years ago now. With that, I mean, that was already, everything was on social media, and like everybody already knew about it. So, obviously you can use his name right off the bat because everyone can see it happening. It's already public knowledge and things like that. But let's say a team's being investigated for hazing, and then there's people like emailing you saying, "Oh, I think I know who one of the kids is that's involved in it." You got to corroborate that with authorities. You can't just take someone's word for it on that kind of stuff. So it's very all over the place. You just have to be, investigating the authorities as much as you're investigating the situation, because it's still up to you to get that information from authorities as well.
So that's curious, because, my follow-up to that would be, in the professional covering high school athletics, the whole, is it better to be first with the story, or is it better to be correct with the story kind of thing, right? So that kind of adds to, what you're saying. I think like you're saying kind of like you got to make sure that you're correct on everything, especially when dealing with a minor, before more, that's more important than like quote unquote being first out there.
Yeah, I know. I mean, in these days where everything's like the deadline is ASAP always now. There's never like, oh, get it ready by this time for the newspaper. It's like when you have a story, you have it. Okay, so get it up as soon as possible. But for certain situations like that, I mean, we do have protocols set up where, someone has to look into it first. Like, let me see what you have information wise. Can we run with this? If someone does beat us to it, maybe they got the information we were trying to get. I can live with that, but I'm not going to run something unless I have the information. So.
Yeah, because that's great, man. And Brian, that's exactly what I was going to ask, man. In this day and age, when everybody's a reporter now, it's like everybody, like you got between TikTok and Snapchat and Facebook and whatever social media you want, everything is right there immediately. So as a reporter, and you see it so often, man, between not just grammatical errors, because they're typing 30 miles an hour. It's the getting it out first is so important, but you can't be wrong. And so you want to be first, but you can't be wrong. And when you're dealing with, even with dealing with minors, because a lot of times you can't even say a minor's name until it's public record, right? Like, you got to be very careful with that. You can get sued for certain things. And then even if they are adults, you could still, one wrong quote, one miscue, that's liable, or all that. And so I imagine, Jerry, that's a very touchy road for you. Is there a specific, I know you said the J. Rube Campbell, but is there you probably had a few where you had to be like, okay, I got to hold back in here and make sure. Is there ever time when you really knew you had something and you wanted to run it, but maybe your editor was like, no, maybe we should hold back?
Well, during that whole, De La Salle hazing incident just a couple of years ago, there was a lot of information that was coming across from that. Some of it was partially true, and these partial truths are never really a good thing to run on. And there were times where it was tough to get in touch with the authorities, the police departments and all that stuff, lawyers and things like that. But as much as I want to get that information, and when I do get it, I'll run it. If I don't have it, I just don't feel comfortable going with it unless I know it's 100% verified, because otherwise, I mean, it's just kind of like a rumor mill type thing that you're running. And I know those things can do well too, but you don't want to do like an opinion type piece like that for something serious. So, you just got to understand the situation and make sure you're verifying. I mean, that's the best way I can put it. I mean, you mentioned that, these days with social media and everyone having a portable video camera with them at all times, everyone's a reporter. But I mean, not to kind of like say I'm tooting my own horn here, like the industry, not everyone's a journalist though. Everyone can be a reporter, but not everyone's a journalist. And there's a certain type of integrity. And I know, especially these days, like, last 5 years or so, a lot of people have turned on journalists. They've gotten bad raps for things. And there are people who do it wrong and, give the industry a black eye. But at the same time, like 99% of the people out there are trying to do it right. And, we've been trained in this business. We went to school for this. We've been mentored in this business. We've learned from other colleagues in this business on how to approach these situations. We're just not, putting things out there for likes and stuff like that. So, everyone can be a reporter, but do they have the journalistic integrity to, make the right decisions in certain places? I don't think so. So it does make it tough too, because, there could be people out there that are tweeting something that contradicts what you have, but they're false. And, it's like, well, I verified this. So, I mean, unless this person was lying to me, which who knows, they might be, this is what I have right now. Okay. So, I mean, it's a crazy world we live in terms of how information gets out there. So we're responsible for being as careful as we can be with it.
So do you ever, you brought up the integrity thing, and do you ever worry about, integrity and credibility in covering high school sports? And the reason I ask is think about every year, hey, Jim Harbaugh to, fill in the blank NFL team, right? You know what I'm saying? And I think back to the Les Miles situation, when he was going to leave LSU and go to Michigan, and Kirk Herbstreit was so certain that was going to happen, right? Like in my mind, like when I hear those stories or when I see that stuff tweeted out, I mean, I probably think everybody now is like, all right, like we're going to wait till we see it, but at what point is it like, you don't buy into what those guys are saying anymore and they're crying wolf, so to speak? Like, do you ever, cover in high school sports or do any of your colleagues kind of, I don't want to say that they've lost credibility or whatnot, but is that a concern that you have,
I understand what you're talking about with the speculative stuff that people put out there. And in a way, I think Twitter was kind of made for that kind of stuff. I mean, Twitter, even if you are a journalist, it's still a place for personal opinion or thoughts, or just to, put out what information you have. But if you're actually publishing it under your name officially and stuff like that, I think that's a little different. So I think, people expect, you to be the same when you're publishing your stories as you are when you're tweeting and stuff, which is why all the time you see these things now, like, retweets aren't endorsements and stuff like that. I mean, I feel like there should be a place where people should be able to, see what's out there in the rumor mill, or just say, this is what I'm hearing, because then you can actually find some maybe different leads when people respond to that stuff. But you don't really see that much with high school sports, I don't think. I mean, with high school sports, it's pretty easy to kind of know what's what's what. I mean, it's not like a cottage industry like college and the NFL are. People are usually pretty straightforward with you. I mean, if someone is a little less forthcoming than they usually are, you might think something's up and you have to ask around. But I try not to get caught up in like the rumor mill stuff with high school athletes, because that's just silly, in my opinion. I know like stuff gets crazy now with, every kid has to announce their top 15 or top 20 or whatever they are.
Oh my God. Yeah, that's what I want to touch on for sure.
And people want to speculate on where they're going and stuff like that. And, I'll talk to kids about that stuff. I was like, do you guys have a favorite school right now? Or tell me what you think about the in-state schools. And so if I publish a story on a kid who has 5 schools left, and Michigan State are 2 of the schools, they'll give me their opinion on it, and then I'll publish a story, and they're like, well, what about the other schools? And I was like, well, I was only interested in what they thought about those schools for this story. And, people will start calling you biased and other things like that because of it. But it's like, I also work in Michigan, and like, no one cares what they think about Iowa, except for people. So, I mean, people want to know, fans. Do they want to come to Michigan or Michigan State? So, yeah.
So, yeah,
I don't know if I answered your question there. I kind of went on a tangent. So
it's cool. No, I like it.
No, that's fine. Like with that though, because there are, the high school level, there can be some stars for sure. I think of in football, Donovan Edwards, or in basketball, and Amani Bates. Amani Bates was a star since 8th grade or something, go all the way back to Chris Webber or something. How do you handle a kid like that? Where he's a bona fide superstar at the age of 15. Do you, have you had any instances where you talk to a kid like that? And then how do you approach something like that where the whole country is talking about a kid like Amani Bates was, they were calling him the next LeBron and all that, the number one high school player in the country, as a sophomore. How do you approach a situation like that?
Yeah, well, I didn't actually report on Imani Bates directly because he was in our Ann Arbor coverage area, but I saw him play a few times. But a few years before that, you guys might know the name of Josh Jackson. He's a guy on the Pistons now. He was at Detroit Consortium, and at the time he was the number 1 recruit in the nation, and he was the biggest recruit that I think MLive have covered in the last decade, aside from Imani Bates, in the sport of basketball. And I was at his games all the time. I was always trying to talk to him. And he was on, basically a gag order from his mother. He wouldn't talk to the media. We could talk to the coach. And all these rumors started going around about him transferring to a prep school. I remember I was in East Lansing. I was sleeping on a blow-up bed in one of my friend's apartments because I was there for the state championships in basketball for girls. And I got a call the morning I was getting ready from Josh Jackson's mom, and she's going off on me about saying, why did you guys publish this story about him going to a prep school? That's never going to happen. We didn't say anything like that. Because one of our other reporters who was on our Detroit team at the time said he wanted to go after it. And I was like, okay, you got my blessing. Good luck with that. And he ended up talking to various sources, but he could never talk to Josh. And all of them said he was leaving. His mom said he wasn't. And of course he left after that season. But, I had to, it's a really weird thing to have these kids who are still 16 years old. I think, what was he, 15? He was probably 16 at the time. And the whole country is just wondering what this kid is doing. And then he's not saying anything. It's just wow, this is kind of ridiculous because it's I'm trying to, I'm right in his backyard and I'm trying to get information from him. So I was lucky enough though to kind of smooth things out with his mom and stuff like that. We got on the same page, and she was actually gave me permission to interview him after the championship, which was nice because he never went to the post-game interviews. after games, even after the semifinals when they won at the Breslin Center, he didn't go. And then after they won the championship, he came up to the podium and they let me ask like the first 3 questions, which I thought was pretty cool. So yeah, it was definitely a trip because you're not used to dealing with like celebrity personalities at a teenage level. But with now this name, image, and likeness stuff, kids are going to be grooming themselves a lot for this moving forward. So I think we're going to see a lot more of like these kids promoting themselves on social media. You're already seeing, like, I saw a tweet from a middle school kid who was tweeting his GPA, his points per game. I'm like, dude, you're middle school. Enjoy the process a little, you know?
Hey, I think LeBron's kid got an offer when he was 2 years old or something from Coach from Kentucky.
Yeah,
I think it was 2 when he got that. So it's all out there.
He grows up to be 5'5". No.
Coach Barnes, how do you deal with your kids and their interaction with social media? Because you're not going to stop them. They're going to be online. And, what do you tell these kids? Hey, just don't do nothing stupid, or like?
Yeah. I mean, Bobby Bowden had one of his rules was just don't embarrass the university. Right. And so when I talk to our guys, I just tell them, similar thing, like, everything we want, the way we want people talking about our program is all positive, and not just our program, our school. We talk about all the people that they represent, right? The alums and the staff at the school, and, the rest of the student body. And so the biggest thing is just don't embarrass the university, don't embarrass the school and the football program. And if there's something if you have to question anything about putting it out there, then don't put it out there. Make sure everything is positive about yourself and go from there. I'm not a big believer in I'm not a big rule guy. What I mean by that is, like, we don't have a list of rules to say, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. Like kids know right from wrong. Right. And I believe adults know right from wrong. Right. And then some of them might need some reminders here and there, but it's basically like, do the right thing. You always want to talk about our team in a positive light, and everything we do in a positive way. And we just leave it at that.
Yeah. And Jared, there's you see a lot of stuff, maybe not necessarily with the athletes, but I'm sure there's a lot out there, but just like young kids doing dumb things on social media, and then it's out there forever. You're in a unique position because, like we talked about before, you are a high school coach, but you're also a professional reporter covering high school kids. Is there a balance that you have where if a kid does something stupid online, you have to report it? I mean, has there been a situation where you've come across a kid makes a dumb tweet, or even like somebody, like a kid, he'll be 18, but he made a dumb tweet when he was like 14 and it gets dug up? Because you've seen a lot of that nowadays. Have you been in a situation where you had to decide to discuss a negative social media aspect for a high school athlete?
I don't think I've actually really been in that position. I think it would have to take something really egregious for me to like go all TMZ on it. Because like social media is just chaos. And people are going to say some stupid things from time to time, even from people you don't expect. But, I go to practices all the time to interview kids. And, I usually go at the beginning or the end. So I'm trying not to interrupt what's going on. And when I'm there at the end of practices, coaches are always telling kids, especially, when it's like homecoming week or something, it's like, don't do anything stupid. All right. You guys know what right from wrong is. If you see someone who's doing something and they want you to do it, stop and think about it. All right. I mean, there's, I've coached kids in my own program that have gotten suspended for, various ridiculous things that they've done. Nothing social media wise, but, something that they brought like alcohol to a dance or something like that, or something stupid. And those things not only stick with you, but like if it's on social media, like you said, people can go back and dig that stuff up. And even if that's not you anymore, I mean, I don't even realize any of the things I probably would have said on social media when I was like 14 years old, because, we're young and we think we know everything. And we think our opinion matters more than anybody else, even though we're just some 14-year-old kid. But I don't think I've ever had to really report on someone's tweet like that. Like, even if kids talk crap to their rivals all the time online. There was one I did report on, but it was just something kind of fun because, like the Warren De La Salle, Brother Rice rivalry, they call them the pumpkins because they're orange helmets or whatever. And so it's always around Halloween time. So they put like a jack-o'-lantern that says De La Salle or something in the middle of their football field, like the night before. And that gets on social media. Yeah, I'll report on that because it's funny. And it's just like, oh, look at this, rivalry continues and stuff like that. But if they're saying like, oh, I'm going to totally posterize this guy or something like that, and then they get posterized themselves, I'm not going to like say something stupid about that. So.
Oh, that's good. Jared, what do you love? Because you've been doing this for a long time. I'm sure you probably had other opportunities or you could have ventured out to other places. What is it about covering high school sports that you love?
Well, I think it goes hand in hand with coaching. Because first and foremost, if I could coach full time, I would. High school coaches don't get paid full-time salary, so we have to have another job on the side. That's why most of them are usually teachers, or like me, I'm a journalist. But I always love working with younger people, and I learned that actually when I was in high school myself. And then being able to tell their stories on top of that is what makes it great. Because it's not like you're going to reach millions of people by talking about some kid from, Woodhaven or Madison Heights or wherever they're from, but you're going to make a difference in, not necessarily their lives, but you're going to make their day. Their family's going to really appreciate it. The community is going to really appreciate it. Just to have someone's voice be heard in a special way, and you can communicate that for them. I think that's really special, to be able to tell someone's story for them in a way that maybe they couldn't convey themselves. They just need someone to tell it for them. So I guess it's the way of putting it. That's what I love about reporting on sports in general. It's fun to do that at a professional level. I feel like at the professional level, you get a lot more people who are into the statistics and the analytics and the playmaking and the playbooks and all that stuff. I've always liked being more of a storyteller. So that's why high school sports is just as fine with me as it would be for professional sports. You can tell as many stories as you want, and it's great to do it for kids and young people to also show an example to the other kids out there. Kid from your own neighborhood did something great, and you might be younger than them, and it'll inspire you to do something great. So like the Sean English story. The kid lost a leg, and he went on to run a race after that. If you can inspire other people with your writing, that's what makes it worth it. So
that's awesome. All right, Coach Barnes, I think we can wrap this one up, man. And this is good stuff. Got anything for Jared?
I do. I just wanted to tell him, thanks for what you do for all sports, especially high school football. So this, like I said, before we, hopped on the podcast, like we're really embracing and want to talk about the great things in the state of Michigan when it comes to Michigan high school football. So if you could, give me some of the things that you love about covering high school football in the state of Michigan, whether it be, the coaches if you want, but just, you talked about the kids and the great kids and just maybe some of the traditions and whatnot. Like what is it about, Michigan high school football that you love to cover?
Ooh, that covers
pretty loaded
a
question.
Variety of things.
Sure did.
Man. Well, since my main area is, the Metro Detroit area, which is like for the coverage area that I have, it's probably like 90% Macomb County, 99% of Oakland County, and like 100% of Wayne County. There's about 160 some odd schools there. And I think the best part about covering high school football in this area is not just the great teams and the great athletes, but the tradition. There's just so much. Football goes way back in the Metro Detroit area of great teams. And then just being able to meet some of these coaches over the years, like, Fracassa, Mac, all these all these great guys who have already retired, but, won tons of games. Coach Harrington over at Harrison, who's now assistant at North Farmington, and who's, by the way, like one of the nicest guys in the world. I don't know if you've ever talked with him before, but he's awesome.
Yeah, great human being. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and just being able to get to know the people and the history behind the beat that I have is really cool. And also, I think the best thing for covering high school football, though, for me, is just to see a kid that I covered on Saturday television or on Sunday television sometimes. It's just be like, man, I knew that kid when. And it's really great to see, because I mean, a lot of these kids, unfortunately, still from the Detroit area. There's a lot of rough neighborhoods, and that's their ticket out. And to see them be able to punch that ticket and fulfill their dream is really, really cool. And I probably played no role in that, but to be a part of that process and to report on that process is very cool. Because when I see a guy like Donovan Peoples-Jones, who I covered, front and back when he was in high school, it's cool to see him go out there and, have a big touchdown catch against Michigan State, get his first touchdown in the NFL. That's probably my favorite part, is just to be like, these kids did it. And that's what it's all about at the end, is these kids fulfilling their dreams. Not everyone's going to make it there, but everyone's working toward that. So you got to be happy when someone does it.
Sure. And I can speak for a lot of coaches around, Jared. We appreciate what you do. And I know the kids appreciate what you do as well. Do you have a Twitter handle or anything that you can share to with our listeners if they want to follow you on Twitter? And actually, I'm going to tell them to follow you on Twitter, because you're a great follow and you post some good stuff and you have some great articles out.
Yeah. My Twitter is at Jared Purcell, DET, for Detroit. I know I'm wearing a Cubs hat, but I also root for the Tigers. They're in different leagues. Don't judge me. There's so many great writers that we have at MLive that cover prep sports all throughout Michigan. And that's what makes MLive great, in my opinion, is that we have reporters stationed in various areas. Sure, we don't get everywhere we would like to be, like the UP and the upper lower peninsula, like Traverse City and stuff, but we have people in Bay City, Saginaw, Flint, Ann Arbor, Jackson, Kalamazoo, Grand Rapids, Muskegon, Metro Detroit. So yeah, we get a nice statewide voice from our team. They're all more experienced than I am, save a couple. And they've been doing it for a long time, and they're really great at it. And I couldn't be happier to be a part of that team. So follow MLive.com. All of our different social media handles. You can just do a simple MLive search on Twitter, and it'll bring up our different pages. And then, just look for our stories.
That's awesome. Well, fellas,
and subscribe.
Yeah.
Hey, Tom. Yeah. So if, I want to announce to our listeners as well, we do have our Twitter pages up. It's simply at Inside the Office. One word, at Inside the Office, and my Twitter handle is at Coach Barnes 20. I'm excited to get some, to hype this up even more. Like you said at the beginning, week 3, we've had some awesome guests, and Jared was awesome tonight, and we got an awesome host. So I'm fired up for the next week.
I am, man. We're going to keep this stuff going, man. And Jared, thank you so much. It was a great perspective from the media side. I was hoping you guys might get into it a bit, maybe get mad at each other about something, maybe have an argument a bit. But
the only thing I would, and Jared's never done this, and I haven't had anybody do this yet. So it was funny. I thought about it watching the fantastic NFL games that we had this weekend, and I sat down and I said to myself as I'm on my couch, I'm like, wow, I questioned the Buccaneers blitzing late in the game, and then the Rams hit Cooper Kupp over the top. But what's funny is I caught myself and I realized why you shouldn't do that, because Bruce Arians in his follow-up press conference said, you know what, somebody on the defense didn't get their correct call in, and we weren't aligned correctly and stuff like that. And so my only issue I ever had with any media people, but it hasn't happened in high school football, is sometimes those questions get asked and they wonder, well, why'd you call this? Well, there's always more to the story, like you're saying, even in high school football. But no, we're good though. Jared and I are good. Definitely good.
I get close to asking questions like that. I mean, just at a recent basketball game, like a kid fouled out on the other team who was their big inside guy. And, the opposing team had the lead, so everything was going in their way because their opponent lost their big man, and yet they started shooting threes. I'm like, Coach, why'd you start shooting threes?
Mhm.
So he's like, that wasn't the game plan. And I was like, okay.
Yeah, but like, as you said, right? You
Yeah.
coach high school kids too. Like sometimes they're high school kids, right? They forget their
Yeah.
locker combination. You know, they forget their code to their lunch account and all that stuff, and then we wonder why they do things like that in the game. But it happens
Watching too much Steph Curry, man. Everybody wants to pull up on the logo now.
for sure.
Yeah. Oh man, that's funny. You opened a can of worms though, man, because we could talk about this NFL weekend. Oh my God. I know, Jared, you were posting on Facebook, man.
Freaking awesome,
You
man.
and everybody else, man. This is the greatest weekend of football I've ever seen.
I was talking to my dad on after the Tampa Bay game, and I was like, man, I feel sorry for Kansas City and Buffalo having to live up to that game.
Hold my beer.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
seriously. Oh my
I can't
gosh.
believe it, man. Oh man. Oh, all right. Well, look, Jared, I hope you will come back maybe further down the line during the season because I'm sure there's a lot we can talk about going forward. We could talk, for another hour right now, but
Yeah, I was here for episode 3. I'll be here for 300, man.
There you go. There you go. Maybe we'll do that. You could do 30, 130.
There we go. Yeah.
We like it.
All the 30s. It'll be good times, man. Well, Jared, sports reporter from local sports reporter with MLive.com. And for head coach Brian Barnes with Bishop Foley Catholic High School, my name is Tom Murphy Jr. And we are done with episode 3. Stay tuned for episode 4. We don't know who the guest is yet, but we're going to find one. Actually, real quick, Jared, who are some coaches or maybe even athletic directors, whoever, that in your experience, you think we should add to the podcast?
Oh, man. Well, one of the names that I just brought up, John Harrington, fantastic guy. I mean, he's one of those coaches that would let coaches from other teams come to his practices just to let them see what they were doing. He could talk football all day. He actually let me come over to his house for a story I was working on. I went in his basement and he showed me all of his, he has a shrine to football in his basement at his house. It's amazing. He has everything collected from over the years, the championships, the league championships, all that stuff. I'm sure he has tons of stories for you guys.
Awesome. Cool. All right, Jared, thanks for that, man. And thanks for being on here. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been another episode of Inside the Coach's Office. We will see you next week.